Thank you. And today we are joined by Kate Hardiman, the CEO of Unify 360, and myself, Rachel Worsley, founder at Neurodiversity Media, to tackle this question for today's podcast, which is, can you lead? Can autistic people lead, I guess, or can autistic people lead people? So just to throw it over to Kate, what do you think about this particular question?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Rachel. I think this question came up for me a little while ago when I read an article by April Lee. She's the Australian who founded the Safe Space Collective, and they sell software platform to organisations that provide neuro-affirming resources to neurodivergent employees and people and culture teams. And in Rachel's former life as a senior leader in the tech industry, she was being interviewed for the role of Chief Technology Officer, which she was more than qualified for. And she decided to mention her autism diagnosis to the interview panel. When she did that, apparently the room just went deathly quiet. Um, and after a few sort of uncomfortable moments of silence, the question came back to her: how can you lead people if you're autistic? Which is gobsmacking. She didn't get the job, and we'll never know whether that was the reason, but it's a shocking reminder of the types of misconceptions and judgments that are out there that NDs have to deal with in their careers. So I decided to go down a rabbit hole on autism and leadership to explore some of the challenges autistic leaders face, but also importantly to identify and make clear their strengths. So, in terms of challenges, it's important to acknowledge a common perception that's out there. Autistic leaders are sometimes seen as having a tendency to be negative and to focus on potential pitfalls rather than opportunities. I don't see this characteristic as a flaw. I see it as just a different way of processing information where identifying obstacles is often more important times than seeing possibilities. For example, I was thinking, how good would that be as a trait in risk management or emergency service type roles? So I see this as a really valuable perspective someone can bring to a leadership role, because it's a critical eye that anticipates challenges before they happen. And who wouldn't want that superpower in their organisation? But autistic leaders do have to deal with other hurdles as well. So social communication can be challenging, things like interpreting non-verbal cues, and the nuances in vocal tone might not come as naturally to them, which has the potential to complicate team dynamics and the relationships with stakeholders at times. I've heard stories about that. Sensory processing issues with things like sound and light and smell can also present issues, because some environments lead to sensory overload. If you can imagine working in an environment where there are strong chemical smells or loud machine noises, for example, that can be really overwhelming for someone who's neurodivergent. And also, executive function tasks like planning and organising, as well as adapting to change, can be a challenge in really fast-paced or unpredictable settings. So those are the kinds of challenges that I have discovered a lot of autistic leaders can face in the workplace.
Those are really some interesting challenges, I suppose, and I can identify with quite a few of those challenges. I suppose as the leader of my own organization, I used to employ two employees, and I found sort of the communication between them. One was neurodivergent, one was neurotypical, but we all had to sit down and agree on our communication styles and how we would communicate information. So not writing long paragraphs of instructions, but like keeping it into bullet points, because that was how one ADHD employee was really able to absorb the instructions that I was giving her about social media, for example. So that was quite tricky. I guess it's interesting you mentioned about was it the negative
Yeah,
bias?
negativity. Yes, that's a perception that they default to the negative rather than the positive.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of interesting. Like, I guess it's a little bit of catastrophizing sometimes, and sometimes you have to, I guess, in business, sometimes, you have to be prepared for things that might go wrong and you have to find ways to mitigate those risks. So that kind of mindset can be useful, but can also slip into, constant pessimism, which can also undermine your mental health. So you have to kind of strike a balance. So those are the challenges, but I guess we would love to hear more about the strengths of what autistic leadership can bring to the space. Do you have any strengths you can speak of, Kate?
Yes, on the flip side of the negative we were just talking about, there are a range of strengths that autistic leaders can bring to the table and that can really benefit organisations. So their attention to detail is often second to none, and that lets them identify critical things that others might overlook, and that can be an advantage in roles that need things like really good quality analysis and precision skills. Autistic leaders also tend to value consistency and routine, and those are the traits that make them really reliable and predictable in their leadership style. And I think consistency of leadership style, knowing what you can expect every day when you turn up to work from your leader is a really valuable asset. They also tend to be honest and direct in their communication, which some people, yes, can experience as blunt, perhaps, but that can really foster transparency and trust in the workplace, which are ingredients of every successful, inclusive workplace. And they can also really be good at recognizing patterns and trends, which work well when you're in decision making mode and looking to try and identify opportunities. And lastly, their ability to maintain focus. That really helps autistic leaders to tackle complex and lengthy projects with a level of dedication that's really hard to match. So I think from my research, I have discovered that autistic leaders bring many unique strengths and talents to the table.
Definitely. And I can think of like one example is Sherry Clonan from the Digital Picnic digital marketing agency. And she comes across as really hyper empathetic, but also really details orientated and just a caring leader of her staff and also about the results that her agency produces. Like, for example, she recently announced a policy of funding autism and ADHD assessments for people who really needed it, because she knew that everyone may not have the privilege of that diagnosis, but showing up at work as your true authentic self is a priority for her business, I suppose. And, it's those kind of actions that kind of make her a really great leader, I suppose, to care about these staff and also be inclusive because not everyone has that privilege of seeking something that could help them be themselves in the workplace. And I suppose like with Cherie, like she also, talks openly on her LinkedIn. She's a top voice on LinkedIn actually, and she talks openly about the challenges. So she's very honest and blunt, but she is very open about the challenges she faces and the solutions that she kind of uses to get through like the challenges in her business life. And I think it really touches on a lot of the strengths that you mentioned, Kate, about that sort of thing. And I really admire her for it. And we just need more autistic leaders like her to kind of really show like, you know, we can lead, and we're not just employees, but we are capable of leadership and genuine, inclusive, empathetic leadership. Being like a servant leader, she talks a lot about being a servant leader and really serving her staff, which I think is really inspirational. So yeah, Kate, did you have any thoughts to add to that?
Well, firstly, isn't she an amazing example? I mean, an autistic leader doing incredible things, running a very successful business, but also investing back into her autistic community as well and making life a much more well-rounded, empowering experience for them at work. So yeah, she's fantastic. I'd encourage anyone to follow her on LinkedIn and her company's journey. I guess my closing thought on all of this is that autistic leaders can have many unique attributes. They're ranging from their analytical abilities to their honesty and attention to detail. And those traits can really drive success for organisations. So my advice for organisations is to really look at recognising and appreciating and then leveraging these strengths, because you have a valuable asset in that person who can make a really great contribution to your business.
Thank you so much, Kate. I really appreciate your time today.
Pleasure. Thanks, Rach.